The blizzard roared outside like a beast unchained, snow swallowing everything in its path, including me. I had never imagined my husband's family, the people I once called my own, would leave me to die in it. After the accident that left me paralyzed from the waist down, they made it clear I was no longer welcome in their perfect little world. I was now, in their words, a burden. It started subtly. Cold stares at breakfast, whispered words when I wheeled into the room. My mother-in-law, a woman who smiled too brightly when she lied, often said, "You should have been more careful. Look what you've done to our son's life." As if my shattered spine was an inconvenience to their pride. The night they threw me out was colder than anything I'd ever felt. The snow had been falling for hours, and my husband, Daniel, didn't even look me in the eyes. He just stood there, watching as his mother placed my suitcase near the door. I remember the feeling of betrayal sinking in when his brother opened the door, letting the freezing air slap my face. "You can go to your parents," they said. But my parents had died years ago. They knew that. Still, Daniel didn't say a word. He stood frozen, his wedding ring glinting in the dim light. When I refused to move, his mother hissed, "Fine," and with a push, my wheelchair rolled out onto the icy porch. The door slammed behind me, locking me out of what used to be my home. The storm bit at my skin, snowflakes like shards of glass against my cheeks. My fingers were numb, but my heart was burning. I had trusted these people. I had given everything. My love, my loyalty, my patience, and this was how they repaid me. For a moment, I thought maybe it was better to just close my eyes and let the cold take me. But somewhere deep inside, a spark ignited. They didn't know everything. They didn't know who I really was, or what I had been quietly building long before the accident. Before I met Daniel, I was the sole heir to my late grandfather's company. But I never flaunted it. I wanted love that wasn't tied to money, so I kept my fortune private, investing quietly while living a simple life. After my marriage, I had transferred $101 million into a trust fund under my name, untouchable, invisible to anyone who didn't know where to look. They thought I was helpless. They thought I had nothing. But that night, while the storm tried to bury me, I made a vow. They would see me again, but not as the woman they pitied. They would see me as the woman they tried to destroy. I don't remember much after that. Just flashes, the white of the snow, the sound of tires, then warmth. A stranger, a truck driver, found me on the side of the road and rushed me to a hospital miles away. The doctors said I was lucky to survive. But I didn't feel lucky. I felt alive for one reason only, revenge. During my recovery, I used every moment to plan. I had connections, lawyers, and resources that could bury Daniel's family in their own lies. I began with quiet precision, transferring ownership of a few key assets Daniel depended on, exposing his family's hidden debts, and anonymously donating money to charities in their name, forcing public eyes to turn toward them. Months passed. My body was weak, but my spirit was unbreakable. By the time I returned to the city, the storm had long melted, but the one I carried inside me was just beginning. I arranged a charity gala under my foundation's name. Invitations went out to the elite, including Daniel's family. They came, unaware that the woman they abandoned in the snow was the one hosting the event. I'll never forget the moment they entered the hall and saw me on the stage. My dress shimmered under the lights, my wheelchair gleaming like a throne. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Daniel's mother's face went pale. "Some people," I said into the microphone, "believe strength is measured by what you can stand on. But true strength is what you rise with, when the world leaves you crawling." The applause that followed was deafening. Daniel looked shattered, realizing too late that I had never been weak. I turned my gaze toward him and smiled, a small, cold smile. "To my husband," I said, "and his family, who taught me what betrayal feels like. Without you, I wouldn't have discovered the power of standing tall without ever standing at all." The courtroom was packed that morning, the air heavy with tension and curiosity. I sat in my wheelchair at the front, dressed in a sleek black suit that matched the calm expression on my face. My husband's family sat across from me, whispering, glaring, and pretending to still hold some power. They didn't. Not anymore. Months ago, they had thrown me into a blizzard, thinking my paralysis made me helpless. They laughed while shutting the door behind me, never knowing that the woman they discarded was worth $101 million and had every resource to make them kneel. When the bailiff called the court to order, Daniel refused to look at me. His mother clutched her pearls dramatically as if she were the victim. His father sat stiff, his jaw tight, his pride already bruised by the headlines outside the courthouse. Reporters waited in the hall, whispering about the billionaire widow who came back from the dead. It wasn't far from the truth. They had buried me in snow, and now I was about to bury them in evidence. My lawyer, Mr. Kane, stood beside me, sharp as a blade. He didn't need to shout to command attention, his confidence did that for him. Your Honor, he began, my client was abandoned by her husband and in-laws after an accident left her paralyzed. They stripped her of her rights, threw her out into a snowstorm, and attempted to seize her assets. What they didn't know is that Mrs. Hayes is the legal owner of multiple properties and the primary stakeholder in the trust they were secretly stealing from. The courtroom buzzed with murmurs. Daniel's lawyer tried to object, but the judge raised her hand. Proceed, she said. The judge was a woman who had seen every form of greed and cruelty in her career, but even she looked shaken as evidence was projected on the screen. Emails from Daniel's mother mocking me, messages between Daniel and his brother discussing how to get rid of her quietly, and financial records showing their attempts to forge my signature on property transfers. Each document hit them like a hammer. Daniel's face turned pale. He finally looked at me, his lips parting, but no words came out. I stared back, unblinking. I wanted him to see what he'd created, a woman he could no longer control or manipulate. He used to tell me I was lucky to have married into his family, that I'd be nothing without their name. But today, their name was the one being dragged through the mud while mine shone brighter than ever. Mr. Kane handed the judge a file, thick with documents. My client, he continued, never sought revenge. She simply sought justice. But since the defendants chose deceit, my client will now exercise her full rights to the assets and compensation due. The judge nodded slowly. I've reviewed this thoroughly, she said. Her tone was calm, but her eyes were sharp. The evidence speaks for itself. The defendants are guilty of fraud, abuse, and attempted coercion. You will each pay restitution and forfeit any claim to Mrs. Hayes's estate. The silence that followed was deafening. Daniel's mother gasped, clutching her husband's arm. His father cursed under his breath, slamming his fist on the table. Daniel just sat there, defeated, the arrogance drained from his face. I took a breath and let a small smile form. Not one of triumph, but of peace. Because this wasn't just about money, it was about showing them that I was never weak, that they couldn't destroy me no matter how hard they tried. After the verdict, reporters swarmed the steps outside. Cameras flashed, microphones thrust toward me as questions poured in. Mrs. Hayes, what do you have to say to your husband's family now? One asked. I paused, the wind tugging at my hair. Forgiveness, I said softly. Not for them, for myself. They taught me that power isn't about walking into a room. It's about knowing you don't have to stand tall. That night, I returned to my home, a sprawling penthouse overlooking the city skyline. The lights below sparkled like stars, and for the first time in a long while, I felt truly free. My staff greeted me warmly, and my nurse helped me settle by the window. The reflection staring back at me was no longer the broken woman they'd left in the snow. She was someone new, someone forged from pain and fire. I thought about Daniel then. I imagined him packing his things, his family tearing into each other, blaming everyone but themselves. They had built their empire on deceit, and it had crumbled the moment I decided to fight back. My phone buzzed with a message from Mr. Kane. It's done. The accounts are secured. You're untouchable now. I smiled, closing my eyes. In the months that followed, I started a foundation for people with disabilities, funding rehabilitation programs and providing shelter for abuse survivors. I turned the darkness I endured into light for others. My story spread across the media, a woman paralyzed, abandoned, but unbroken. People called me the Blizzard Survivor, a name that made me laugh sometimes because they didn't know how true it was. One afternoon, while speaking at a charity event, I noticed a familiar face at the back of the hall. Daniel stood there, older, smaller somehow. He didn't approach, just watched. I didn't look away. He needed to see that I was thriving, that I had turned their cruelty into strength. When I finished my speech, the crowd stood in applause, and Daniel disappeared into it like a ghost fading into the past.